there! So today I'm just going to take you through an orientation of the reformer. If you've never used one before, if you're due to use one, newly using them, then you want to sort of know how they work. So here on the reformer, basically it's a sliding carriage. It's attached to resistant springs. These traditional reformers have 4 equal weighted springs. You might find in other kind of more contemporary modern reformers, they might have colour coding to the springs. So you just have to sort of play around with how this feels, and maybe if you're using a different reformer, translate that to that reformer. These reformers are all based on the kind of original pattern designs of Joseph Pilates, so the spec dimensions are very, very, very accurate for the exercises he created on them. Again, different reformers will have to be made differently, so they'll probably be longer, there might be narrower, there might be more space between here and here, and it changes how the exercise is performed and feels. So I recommend where you can to work on the kind of more original spec reformers, but of course use whatever you have got to get your feeling. How these work is you're attached to that resistance down here. The springs are pushed against to go out, and of course if I let myself go, it slangs back home. My job is not so much about pushing the springs out, although of course that helps me to fire up my muscles, but can I avoid the clanging home, the spring pulling me back? So I have to learn how to resist that pulling back, that resistance, from my own internal body. That's what Pilates is about. Whether it's on the mat, the chair, the barrel, the Cadillac, reform, whatever it is, you're trying to resist from your low, between the hips, deep, closer in towards the body, internal muscles, and you're pulling those lower abdominal in and strongly internally upwards. That then, when the spring comes back in, pulls internally up here and closes the spring softly. You want to practice that concept. You've got a foot bar here. The foot bar lowers down by lifting the black bar up, and the silver bar gets pushed out the way. You can do it like this with your hands. It gets pushed back into a slot, make sure it goes in the slot. But also, when you're lying down, to save yourself having to keep getting up, then you can just put your foot underneath, grab the silver bar with your other foot, and you lower the bar down. And that obviously saves time, getting up and getting down, efficiency of movement, fit more exercises in, and makes what we call the transitions clean and tidy. If that's not possible, of course, you can use your hands. So the foot bar just goes up and down. There are springs attached onto here. When you're removing and changing the springs, you want to get good grip strength around the belly of the spring, not the hoop on the top. Grab the spring, remove it, place the springs on that you want. There's 4 equal springs. It doesn't really overly concern you at the beginning of where the springs go, but if you're removing springs, I would remove them from the inside, like the middle springs. So if I asked you to be on 2 springs, 2 outside springs would be good, because then you've got one left leg, one right leg. However, if I play around with the springs and I put the 2 middle springs, that's going to bring me closer into my midline, and you may need that more than you need this. So it's not one size fits all. But generically, as we say, 2 springs or 3 springs, whatever, just be on 2 outside springs, and then eventually, as you're playing around, perhaps more in a one-to-one setting, you can learn on what fits and feels for you better. So from the foot bar, you've got the springs, and you've got this main belly of the part here. This is your matted area. This is the carriage that we might lie down on, we might kneel, we might stand, we may be facing forward, facing backwards, facing sideways, all sorts of things. And we just push the carriage out and in, it won't flip up or anything. Notice how the mat space here is very much smaller than a mat space that you might lay down on doing mat work. That means that you're constrained by the shoulder box and by the foot bar, and you've got a much smaller basal support. Anytime you work on a smaller base of support, it is more challenging. The mat is a very large base of support, so is something like the Cadillac. Take it to the reformer, it's slightly smaller. Take it down again, smaller. You might be looking at the chairs, and the wonder chair is a very small little kind of mat. So know that when you're taking the base of support down smaller, obviously it becomes more challenging. And this base of support is smaller than a big, large, open space of a mat. It gives you the constraints of the shoulder blocks and the foot bar, which automatically puts you in this kind of more contained setting, and that puts your body under more pressure, under more resistance. Your job is to accept that and then find space inside your body against this, so it doesn't just crumple you up. The shoulder blocks and the foot bar will also give you a lot of feedback. So if you've got your both shoulders lined up to the shoulder blocks, they should be resting here. You might find that feels quite heavy because you're not used to it in the mat. They should be there. But if you start to feel that one shoulder is more obvious than the other, probably you're wonky. So it gives you that feedback to your body. Don't change the apparatus, change yourself, and the apparatus will help you give that feedback. Same at the foot bar, the feet will tell you a lot of feedback, so they will tell you, am I pushing too hard on one or the other? Am I working on the outside or the inside more? Does one foot really hurt? Do both feet hurt? Do the arches hurt more than the toe knuckles or the heels? It tells you a lot about your body. This reformer is your teaching assistant. So learn from it and then use the toys around the apparatus of the room to help develop your reformer. So as we come up the carriage here, we talk about the shoulder blocks. Here they are. You're resting against the shoulder blocks, and in between the shoulder blocks you've got a headpiece. Notice the headpiece is slightly raised. We want the headpiece to stay slightly raised unless we're going upside down, so anything where the hips are going over the headpiece comes down, and there's a block of wood underneath that you just lift, it goes down flat, or you lift and place it back up again. Check it's correct. You can, of course, all of this is just general. For you as an individual, you may need to have an extra headpiece placed on top if you're quite forward in your neck posture, very round in your shoulders, and some people don't need it at all, they have it down flat. But as a general rule, I would encourage you to have your headpiece up until there's exercises overhead. Back here you'll find your handles that are attached to your leather. They stay here on the hooks, what we call the eyelets, and you're going to leave them on there. So when we hang the straps up, this is where you're hanging them. Hang them on the eyelets. If you continue to the back, the straps are leather, and they go all the way to the back through these little roller runnables, back through underneath and attach. That's the mechanism. It's a very simple mechanism. You always want to check yourself, your own apparatus. Are the clips looking like they're well? Is anything looking like it's fallen apart? If you're going to be working on a reformer, take responsibility and check things like that. So they stay there, and at the back of the room here, we've got a little grip mat, and we've got some extension straps, which we'll need to use when we do exercises of leg circles and frogs and such like. We'll tell you when you need to put on your extension straps, and I'll show you how we do those in another video. They can just stay back here. On this reformer, we have this long piece at the end here, which is a tower. So this is a reformer tower combo. Forget this tower for the purposes of this video. We've also got other pieces of kit. You have got a box and a pole. We keep ours down the front. You should want to keep your box and pole close to your reformer, either here at the front, maybe at the back, but keep it close. Know where it goes and keep it the same place every time. Again, for efficiency of movement, when you need to get your box, you're going to come and get it. Here's your box. It's got handles at the sides. So I'm going to pick it up with the handles. I'm not going to pick it up just like one and twist my back. I've also got a pole on the floor with my box. This is just a wooden pole. We do have weighted bars as well in different kilos of weight. So you pick what is appropriate for you. And there are also miniature bars and long bars as well. So depending on what we need it for. But box and pole that we use together. So if you need to collect your box and pole, you want to collect your pole and collect your box all together. So we're not going one, back, one, back. Again, efficiency of movement. And that's your little orientation. Notice with your springs, when the carriage moves, if I take some springs off, the carriage moves out, you are now on a long spring. If I allow the carriage to relax, obviously I will get pulled back home. So the job really isn't on the reformer to push out and focus on pushing out. Yes, that probably feels quite strong and heavy if you're not used to resistance work. But when I press out, I am, yes, working the muscles of the body. But I want to think about, as I return, resisting that, resisting the springs home. To do that, I press out. As the springs pull me back in, I'm going to pull my lower abdominals between my hips, pull them in and up, and resist internally the spring comes home. The difference, if I show you footwork, sounds something like this. Just going to take a parallel position. Press out. There is me not resisting the springs at all. Now I'm going to try and resist the springs, but from my legs, my external body. That's me resisting from my external body. It takes me forever to close the spring. I'm not really using the spring to help me, and I'm slowing things down. In fact, the carriage hasn't even really closed. You definitely know the carriage is closed when you hear that banging, but we need to control that, and never do we want to hear the banging. So instead, you want to hear something softer. So I'm going to press out the carriage, and when the springs pull me home, I'm going to lift my abdominals and try to come in. Press, lift, press, lift. And I don't know if you can hear on the camera, there's a light sound there. Very kind of, the springs are always humming. You should always want to keep the humming of the springs moving. When we don't hear the springs humming or moving, then we know that we've stopped moving. So we want to keep the springs moving, but we want quiet springs. The same as when we're using things like this, the foot trap. There's a foot strap down here and it's attached to hooks. Again, the traditional ones have two straps put together and attached to two clips. That's for safety. So if for any reason one of the straps fell apart and fell off, or one hook broke, you've got another second strap and you've got another second hook. Not all of the reformers do have that. So if you haven't got that kind of thing on your reformer, it might be worth looking at trying to upgrade your strap. Some straps are very, very long and wide. Again, that's a modification that reformer company have made, but the traditional one is quite narrow. When I place my feet underneath the straps, so maybe I'm doing short box, want my box, and I place it on the top, then I'm going to place my feet underneath the strap, and when I go on it, I want it not to be bang, slang, doing all this, but I want to put my feet under the strap quietly. No clanging noise. The strap is securing my feet underneath it, and what it's doing is giving me an alignment between my ankle, my knee, and the centre of my hip. And if I look down, I can see either my knees are falling in, or from my hips to the knees they are straight, and then maybe the feet are turned down. I want the hip to knee really the most important thing, and then gradually work towards bringing the feet parallel. And that's now reorientating my whole lower leg limb into my hip, my pelvis, and my lower back. So that when I do my short box, I'm keeping my legs orientated in my hip sockets and supporting my back. A very wide strap, I obviously can't recreate a wide strap or a short strap, but a wide strap would feel like my legs have to be out this wide to get tension on the strap. On these straps, the correct kind of dimensions, I've already sat underneath the strap. The strap is resting closer towards the foot and ankle, not on the toes, and I'm here. If I'm very particularly tall, I'll move my box further backwards. If I'm quite short, I'll move my box further closer forward to get the correct tension on the strap. And I'm pulling it this way and this way. That is a really good, important part. And you'll find again on traditional mats, for the mat work, that they have things like that, straps. Use your straps when you can. So that's the orientation around the reformer. Check out some of the other videos that show you the intro level reformer work, or how you kind of really use perhaps your short box, your pole, and other things that might help you just to finesse your reformer work.